All right, guys. Well, welcome to our first Friday live of 2022. We got, I think, kind of a bit of a presentation and some things we want to talk about today. I'm Charles Dolphs. I'm the founder of FM BetterForms, and joining us today is Pearson, Christina, and Andrew, who are going to be doing some presentations, but a few more of us are also in a call. Jason, I see here, and I thought I just saw somebody else as well, Michael, as well from our team. So we'll basically get started. A few things that are new in BetterForms. We don't have a ton of announcements because over the holidays we continued to work on some stuff, but we only deployed a few little things. One of the big things that we deployed at the beginning of the week was a patch, an optimization patch, which we were seeing some slowness in our editors, typically around more congested times around 1 to 3 p.m. in the afternoon. So that's been mitigated now, and that should be quite stable. So you'll see some improvements there. The other thing that's going into beta next week is going to be a new error trapping improvements. So basically right now, BetterForms has limited error trapping, and that makes it a little bit hard for new users to figure out where something went wrong, because there is a big chain of entities. There's things that can happen in the browser, things that can happen between the browser connection to our cloud servers, things that happen between our servers to your FileMaker server, and so on. So at any one of those points, there can be some issues. So one of the big major projects that Eduardo and Ega, I think, who's on the call as well today, are working on is error trapping. We talked a little bit about it in our last meetup. I guess it was in December, and that's going to be going live next week or into early beta. And basically what it means to you is you can do a couple things. First of all, when something goes wrong anywhere in the system, and we're trapping about 50, 60 errors or so approximately. So that means anything from credentials in your helper file, credentials in your business logic file, incorrectly installed scripts in your business logic file, bad connection between FileMaker server and our cloud servers, an issue with our cloud servers, anything like that, even JavaScript errors. Those can all be trapped now and surfaced in the browser. If we're unable to render the site in your browser, that means there's some catastrophic failure that we can't even produce a web page, then it defaults to a standby web page. You've seen that in a lot of systems as well. So that's really exciting. That also means that to try to keep it in sort of BetterForms fashion, we've made provisions where you can trap those errors. So if there's a certain type of error, you want to know if a FileMaker server goes offline and you want to have a custom error page, you don't want the default one, then you can actually add your own page into your navigation slugs, and we'll present that page when those errors happen instead. Or we can also trigger actions. So as you know, BetterForms has a scripting language or actions processor, and we can now run actions when any of those errors occur. So if you're using a third-party monitoring tool or anything like that, you want to trap those things, you have a way of doing that very, very easily. So that's going to be going into early beta next week. And you won't see it right away. You will see. We will deploy it to BF staging version. That's our sort of our test ground, and then later on it'll eventually work its way into production. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is some new features in Tailwind 3. So some of you guys are probably not too familiar with what Tailwind is. So I want to talk a little bit about that, and then we'll jump into the features. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to share my desktop really, really quick here, and just give me a sec. And this is just a really, really, really quick primer on CSS and what CSS is and what Tailwind is, and then what problems that Tailwind solves. So can you guys see that okay?
Yep.
I'll take that as a yes. All right. So I'm just going to I'm going to create just a really, really simple. This is just in BetterForms in our HTML editor, and I'm just going to create a simple div. Div is for a division, and it's just going to say hello world, and that's it. So I got hello world here. Now, normally if I want to style this, I want to make this bold. We can use really, really old school HTML, which is like you can add things like a bold tag. And I can put this is bold, and you can see that there's bold in here. But it gives us we have very limited styling. We can also do things like adding an H1 tag here. H1, and this is title, right? And so on. So we can do those kinds of things, but it's very, very limited. And it doesn't allow us to produce this really, really amazing applications. Actually, you can almost see, if I look at the Zoom page, we can't use traditional pure HTML without CSS buttons and highlights and italics and different sizes and things like that, at least not very easily. So that's where CSS comes in. But one of the problems is with CSS stands for cascading style sheets. And it basically means it's a hierarchical way of adding themes or styling to an application. And so where that comes in, I'm just going to save this for a quick second. And I am in just a little test app. And I'm going to go into our CSS section here. This is just my experimental playground here. So CSS is a little bit cryptic. And because of that, that makes it kind of intimidating and challenging for most people to use unless you're diving into it all the time. As a full stack developer, even CSS is challenging. If it's a front end developer, CSS is not so bad, right? So what it means, what CSS is basically it's allowing, it takes tags, like I can make a tag like we'll call it Friday. Can't see here. Friday, we'll call it Friday Red. And I can take that class, and even this is a little bit cryptic. It's a class because it has a dot and all this kind of stuff. And you don't have to learn this. I just want to show you what Tailwind's going to get rid of all of this and how it's going to solve that. And I can say color red, something like that. So what this does is this takes this tag, if you will, and it associates this styling with that tag. And you can have different things like background color blue and that kind of stuff. So now if I go into my application here, where I was before, and let's
Charles, you misspelled Friday, so you're going to run into trouble.
Okay, make sure I spell it right here because I'm not going to go back. All right, so we got this line of text here. I'm just going to erase this for now, and I'll keep this. And how did I spell it?
2 Ds.
2 Ds? Oh, perfect. That's a special class. So you can see what happened is I put Friday, including my typos, red. And this is an important one because that happens all the time, right? We have a naming convention and we're not consistent. So we got to remember the names. And it's like, oh, I got to go back to my style sheet and I got to check all of this stuff and try to figure it out, right? So CSS was really, really great at the time. And it still is. It's incredibly powerful. Only small iterations now because it more or less does most of what we need. So there's not like huge amounts of change like there was, say, in 10, 15 years ago. But it allows us to style these things up. But the problem is I have to remember all these class names. And then I got Friday red, and then I'm going to have a Wednesday blue, and then I'm going to have a Thursday and I want another red. But do I call it Thursday red? Because I want to reuse the same red. So in CSS, you can put Thursday and Friday reds and make those things like that. But it starts to get kind of really, really congested. And it means you have to keep jumping back to the style sheet to see what's going on and try to figure stuff out. So what Tailwind does is Tailwind is what's called a, let me find it here. Tailwind is what's called a utility-based design system. So what that means is instead of calling something Friday red, let's call it red 500, which is a depth of color of red. And let's call it red 200, which would be a lighter color. And that's the fundamental gist of what Tailwind does, is it takes all of those things that you would normally give a whole bunch of names to, and it says, forget about the names. Let's just apply the specific things, the specific modifications or mutations onto the items that we want. So instead of me putting Friday red in here, I'm just going to have to get serious here. All right, is I can do things like, I can say things like text red 500, right? And there we go. Sorry, I was wondering why my highlights on there. So now I got the same kind of thing, but where this really becomes powerful is I can say things like text 3 extra large, and now I got this larger text, and I can say things like font bold, and it's like, okay, now I'm getting somewhere, right? And I can put some padding, some spacing around it. Now these classes, they're not nearly as cryptic because they're semantically named, and I found myself, it took me probably about 3 days to really kind of learn all the names, right? Which is pretty reasonable for learning something, because you're not learning a new technology, you're learning the words, and I don't have to associate or figure out what the CSS is behind this. What makes a font bold? Well, it's font weight 600 or something like that. What makes padding? Well, that's padding, and then there's could be up to four arguments for this padding function. So it's really hard to use this kind of stuff without this. It's much higher, much steeper learning curve. So we got, I delete that, no, I didn't. So we have things like padding, and then we can put something like maybe a bit of a margin around the item. We can't really see where the margin is here. Let me just turn this on. So you can kind of see where there's my box. And I'm just going to turn this off again. And let's continue in text center. So you can see how I'm styling something up. Background. Let's go red 100. So there we go. So now it continues styling. I say rounded, and that gives me slightly rounded corners. I'm going to go rounded large, and now I got these rounded large corners. And maybe I want to put a border on here, and maybe I want to change the border color like so. All right, and let me just increase the margin a little bit, so you can see how you can build these things out, right? And this, I think it's fair to say, is pretty understandable. It's pretty readable. And the traditional purists would say, well, now you're repeating all of this stuff. But you know what? We have bandwidth now. It doesn't matter if you repeat it. And it actually turns out in actual studies that this ends up becoming about 20% smaller than the old way we did CSS, even though we would repeat all of these classes, because the CSS used to be so congested and you have these massive files. So it's actually easier, faster for the browser to process. It's faster to download or comparable, and it's readable by the developer. So what they've done is they've basically taken all the stuff out of the other file and stuck it in here, right? Tailwind isn't the only utility first framework. There's other ones. I believe Bulma is another one. There's a couple other ones as well, but Tailwind has become really popular. And that's why we adopted it, or we started using it in BetterForms about 3 years ago, maybe, when it first came out, but it was just trial. But now we sort of fully embrace it because it's so powerful. And today we're going to introduce version 3 to our community, if you will. So I'm going to just continue. I'm going to put shadow just to give you an idea of all the stuff you can do. There we go. And let's make the shadow a little bit larger. Right. So there and so on. So you can get an idea. And if we wanted to do some things like hover, if I wanted to change the background color, maybe on hover, so hover. And now I can add the background color. So say background red 50, we'll go a little bit lighter. Right. So now I got this button. Right. So it's really easy to build that kind of stuff. And as you see from some of the presenters today, there's going to be a lot of really kind of cool things that we can do. So that's a little bit about the background of what Tailwind is in terms of utilities. These are technically classes, but they're utility classes. They don't define more than one thing. They define one single thing, and you can use them together. That's the fundamental premise there. All right, let's jump to, this is just a quick introduction video. Is that loud enough?
Can't hear anything.
Okay, let me because it's pretty cool tune. So you can't hear that? Oh, hold up. You know what? I think I might have to do. Sorry, guys.
I think it's on.
Pause this for just a quick second, and let me reshare my screen with just a second here. I'm rocking on here, but yeah, but you can, just a second here. Let me just reshare my screen again. Unfortunately, you have to select this ahead of time. Share computer sound. There we go.
Remember to lower the volume.
Yeah, now I can lower the volume. There we go. All right. Is that okay?
Yep.
All right. Okay, so let me just jump over to here quick. That is that gives a little bit of just a really quick introduction. Let's look at how we would use that. We'll just talk about that really quick, how we'd incorporate that into a website. It's pretty simple. We go to basically Tailwind CSS, excuse me, and we're going to search for the CDN, Content Delivery Network, the CDN link. And if I look for that, I can kind of find it. It's sort of actually hidden away here. And there it is right there. And I'm literally just going to copy that. And I'm going to go over to BetterForms, and we're going to go into our site settings. And this is just a test playground app for myself here. And I have it already installed here, but we will be able to see it here. And I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger. You can kind of see it right here. And we don't need to have this on here. I'm just going to get rid of that, talk about that later. And that's it. That's basically what we need to do to install Tailwind. We just drop this into the DOM header insertions area, which is like the header of a website. See, you can think of it as a plugin, and hit save, and we're good to go.
I'm seeing there's no version number.
Pardon me?
There's no version number in that link or anything like that.
That one isn't. That automatically defaults to latest. Now you can specify. It's a really good question. So if there's some kind of breaking change, and it is generally a better practice to have a fixed version, you can do something like at 3.01 or whatever a valid version is.
Charles, I noticed in the sample apps that you guys have, you have a very different, rather than script, it's a link href.
Correct.
Is there a reason one better than the other?
And not all of our examples have been bumped up to this latest version.
Okay.
That is a task for us to do still. But you can get the most recent, or the proper tag is this one here. So that's the one you should basically be using when your app goes to production. You can find out what the latest version is here. Oops, from their site, but just by looking 3.015, and you can lock in at that. Right. Most of the time, these changes are not breaking. I haven't noticed one break since version 1. There haven't been any breaking changes. It's just been expansion of the base classes. So that's what's involved in installing Tailwind. And let's see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass things over to Pearson. Pearson's our user experience and product designer. He's the one who's producing all the nifty interfaces and beautiful apps. And he's going to talk about some colors and things like that. Don't
sorry,
hear
guys.
you.
Yeah. Sorry. Thanks, Charles. My name's Pearson. I'm the UX designer at FM BetterForms, and I've met some of you before. Some of you might have seen me in a previous Friday Live, but I just want to say good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. I'm going to talk about a little bit about the new colors that were introduced to Tailwind, and I'll share my screen. So these are actually some preset colors that were previously included in Tailwind, I think in version 2. And so this is what Charles refers to when he's writing code with red 500, red 100, red 50. Is in this gradient scale where the lightest one starts at 50, the darkest one ends at 900. And so we had, I think it's 13 colors here in total, which was nice. But you're really limited to the palette that is given. Otherwise, if you want any other color outside of this spectrum, you'll have to customize it yourself, which, it gets a little, it's hard to remember sometimes. You're just remembering hex codes or RGB numbers, and it's much easier to just have a preset color, which is why we're really happy to see that Tailwind has introduced a whole new palette of colors, and this is about 23, I believe. And so there's a lot more variance in the styles that you can get. There's a lot of colors in between, where you can find just the right tone of blue, whether it's cyan, sky blue, getting into the purples. There's a whole lot of colors that you can choose from now, and it makes it a lot easier, especially for me as a designer, to just tell the devs, you know, this button should be this very specific tone of blue or tone of green. There's very little wiggle room, and so I can get designs from concept to product a lot easier. And something interesting is that they have 5 different tones of gray, which sounds maybe redundant, but if you look closely, they're actually varying in temperature, what you might call temperature being a lighter or a colder bluish toned gray, what they call slate, to a warmer tone of gray called stone. So that's a little more red tint or brownish tint. And so it really just depends on the style of interface that you're going for. Maybe something a little more sleek, or maybe something more rustic. You have a lot of options now, is essentially the biggest point here. Next, I want to talk about, talking about the background gradient. So another color element, but with gradients, you can slowly merge into one color to the next. So here, Tailwind has given us the opportunity to, you know, go from a solid color to transparent, or between 2 colors, or between multiple colors. And so what you might use this for is something just to spice up your UI, make something a little more interesting to look at. It's a very modern design style, but it doesn't even have to be something too crazy. We're not going for any kind of Microsoft Word art here. We just want to keep something simple. So I'll show you an example of one of these new apps that we're working on currently called Tasteivore. And this is geared towards a beer festival, beer event. So it's a little more, I think of it as something more fun, something more interesting that you want to catch people's attention with. So on one of our intro screens, I have this blue gradient in the background just to make it look a little more modern. So you can see the difference between the gradient version and just a solid blue version. The solid blue version looks almost just incomplete. There's something missing. It just looks too flat. But by adding just a very shallow gradient, I think this is between a blue 500 and a blue 600 at the bottom, something very slight, but I get this nice light to dark kind of look that really elevates the design, I think, in a very subtle way that isn't immediately noticed, but it does give off that more modern, more styled look. So that's it for colors. I'm going to pass it off to, I don't remember who's next. I hope. Hope the person
Andrew,
going next.
actually.
All right, there we go. Take it away, Andrew.
Yeah, hi, I'm Andrew. I'm going to be presenting a way you can change the colors when you select text. So I'm going to share my screen here. So I'm in one of our examples here, and I have this script tag here that I want people to select. And what you can do here is Tailwind 3.0 has a new class that lets you define what you want to be selected. So here I can add the tag select all. And you can see when you press it, it automatically selects the whole block of text. And if you save that here, it automatically, when you click on the tag here, that lets you automatically select it all. In contrast, let's say you have some elements that you don't want to be selected. For example, this header here, this is unintuitive. You don't want people to be selecting these elements up here. You can also change that to select none. So if you go to the header brand here and give it the tag select none, you can now see that I cannot select the picture, can't select this text, and it works as intended. Another thing you can change is the color. So you see here, it's yellow, not that pretty. We can go back. to where we selected it. And we can change using the tag selection. Selection, colon, and then give it some color. For example, let's say I wanted it to be pink. We can add BG. This is one of the new Tailwind colors. It's called, I hope I pronounced it right, fuchsia. And this would change the background.
Andrew, would there be a space in there? Selection colon space?
Oh, no space. And this should work. Oh, refresh.
I think fuchsia. I think it was not supposed to have an S before the C, maybe.
Oh, you're right. Thank you.
Or-
That's why I use red, because you can see the way I spell.
And then refresh. Actually, oh, I am putting this on the wrong spot here.
That should be good there.
Am I in the right?
Selection.
Oh, I'm in the wrong example. I'm sorry. It was this one.
That'll definitely do it. I think we've all done that.
There we go.
Sometimes even the wrong files.
Selection, EG fuchsia 300, and then you click it. You can see how it changes color. But now the text is a little bit hard to read. So you can also not only change the background, but you can also change the text. So let's go for same color, but a little bit darker.
So this is really, I never even thought about it in the examples for the links. But you know, it's really super useful for if you're copying some kind of an ID or some kind of code off the screen.
Right. So now if you just click it, it hides it all and gives it a nice little color. So
But that doesn't actually select it at that point, does it?
this is selected. So if you, let's say I copied it and then I wanted to go paste it into my site settings. It is selected, but obviously you have to.
So it actually is copied.
Yes.
It's not copied to the clipboard automatically. It won't do that.
Okay.
But
that's
you
what I
could do
asked.
that.
Okay.
We have an action for that. So you could actually put an on-click action and then copy it to the clipboard if you wanted to.
It's selected, and if you do a copy, then
Yep.
it's copies. Oh, gotcha.
Okay, that's it for that. I'm gonna hand it over back to Charles for some caveats.
Yeah, there's a couple of really interesting things here. And some of the places where you can use this, where we found actually in our own app is where we wanted to disable the selection is here. When you're clicking on any navigation, when you're building any kind of navigation, remember, unlike FileMaker, everything is kind of selectable because it's all kind of text or that's rendered in the browser. So when people are moving their mouse is kind of in progress or in movement as they start to push the down button. So I'm going to go to click on that file assets and I go click and I continue to drag. And then suddenly you get this selection, right? And everybody's been in apps where the developer hasn't disabled the selection. So they've kind of gone to, let me see if I can find something that we haven't done. Yeah, here's one here. So this one doesn't have it. So if I go to click on this tab, I start to do that, right? And that's a less than optimal experience. And it also takes the mind off of what you're working on, right? I'm sort of working on something, I go to, and then suddenly, why is this selected? Why the heck is this one way over here selected? And that makes me have to think. So we don't want to make the user have to think. So we can simply add a class on there now to select none. And in this case, this is using the new tab element. And that one is everything is fully addressable. So you can address the bottom class, the tops, the tabs, the spacings. You can make them any width. You can put them vertical or horizontal. You can do pretty much anything you can imagine now with this new tab component. But the main one is just preventing that. So that's a key thing. There are a few caveats in general with using the new Tailwind 3. BetterForms started off as a bootstrap, being the fundamental design architecture underneath And because of that, there are some, let me just do this here for a second. Actually, no, let me go back to that one and let's go to here. Okay. Because of BetterForms has Bootstrap sort of built in underneath the hood, we have to sort of work around that. So when Tailwind installs itself, earlier on I said CSS stands for cascading style sheets. So that means there's a hierarchical process. The last thing is mostly the thing that will take precedence. So if I have Charles red and then Andrew red and Pearson red will end up winning if I'm using those. Like if I have a red defined, I should say, and then Andrew picks a color, I pick a color, Pearson picks a color, and I select red, then Pearson's will win. So there's this kind of a hierarchy thing, and Bootstrap is in our framework. So we have, and you've probably already seen this in your apps by default, when you create a new app in BetterForms, it does a few things. Tailwind, by default, strips all of the sizes and all of the opinion out of the browser. Even a browser, you just open up a plain empty web page and put an H1 tag and an H2 tag, and the fonts or the typefaces are two different sizes. And that's browser opinion as to how something should look. So by default, on an unstyled page that's just pure HTML will have a little bit of style. Bootstrap erases that, but there's a good chance that you're already using some of those styles without having explicitly stating what point sizes and things like that are there. So that's where this comes in. It says Tailwind resets. You've probably seen it before, and it does a few things. Like you can see H1, and it defines these as point sizes, and it just resets those. So if you ever wanted to go in and change the whole size of your whole site, you could change it here. You could do it in CSS, a little harder. Christina, I think later on will show us a way of changing it in an easier way. And there's a few things you can see over here. It's just reassigning the family. So if I wanted to have a different font family, I'd have to include the font, and then I could add it in here and so on. So that's one of the caveats. Bootstrap has a couple. As an older technology, they didn't always follow the absolute best practices, because they're not best practices until there's some history. So one of the things is they have a hidden class, and the hidden class has an important tag on it. I'm just looking for one that has one here. And so that means if I'm using third-party Tailwind components, and we'll talk about those a little later on, some of those will have hidden classes in them, but they'll be using the same name as the Bootstrap class. And if the Bootstrap class has more specificity, which is just a fancy word for saying if it's more important, then it will take priority over the other one. So it'll kind of mess up your design slightly, right? So we pretty much have discovered all of those caveats, and the main ones fall within the way buttons work, because Tailwind resets buttons. And you may have noticed, is it this one here? No, I'm just looking for an app that has it. With the new Tailwind 3, our dev tool button, which is a Bootstrap button, will actually become invisible until you mouse over it. I don't know if it's a bad thing, because I kind of don't mind it like that, but it is an artifact. So I think Christina's going to show us some other things in a second there, and I think she's up next. Is that right, guys? Yeah. So I'm going to pass this over to Christina, and she can show us some other stuff.
Good morning, I'm Christina, and I'll start off by showing the new scroll snap from Tailwind. So I'll be sharing my screen. So it's used for scrolling and aligning objects, and without using this new Tailwind snap class, when a user scrolls, it will land wherever the user stops scrolling. So if I just start scrolling and land here, but I wanted to see this green guy, I had to go back all the way up. And clearly that's very inconvenient. So here is how to use Tailwind's scroll snap. So it works on any scrollable objects. For example, it can be used with text or images, and I'll be showing you how it's used with images. So on here, this is on top to bottom, it's snap Y, and I've set it to snap at the start. So it will snap at the start of every image. And if I scroll down a little bit, it will snap right there at the beginning. If I just go crazy, it will still snap at the start. If I use my trackpad, it's still working. So I think it's super smooth also. And it's definitely a quick fix for landing on random spots when you're scrolling. And they also have something called snap proximity. And that I'll be showing that by using this one. I'm using snap center on this one, so it'll snap right in the center where their eyes are. And over here, when I go over, sorry, 1 second. So it snaps in the center where the eyes are. And I'm using a laptop, so I shrank my screen a little bit so it doesn't hit that medium breakpoint. And the proximity works by going backwards or forward, whichever is closer by the browser default. So if I just go up to the shoulder, it will jump backwards. And
So Christina, sorry to interrupt you. So can you go back to that? So that's snapping to the center right along, in that case, it'll be the center right along here. Is that right?
yeah, in the center
Okay.
of the image. So it snapped right there. And the code is super simple.
Oh, I see the center there.
Logged out.
Yeah, it's a bug. You know what? You may have to just enter the URL again. It's a new issue. That's what happens when you eat your own dog food. We feel the pain of bugs, and we don't claim to not have any. I think every software as it does has bugs and things, but we are very active in squashing them. We're trying our best.
Okay, so over here, I have a div that's the entire. For the vertical, it's the entire container over here. And I've added flex call, so it goes downwards. So it'll be top to bottom. And oops, that is not the right one. It is this one, the second one, sorry. So container, it's got a background gray. And I've added the snap Y class on the parent. I've added a height and a width and an overflow scroll. Down inside here, I have my for loop with my image links. And on this div that's containing the image is where I added the snap start. So the two real main things are snap Y and snap start, and that's from Tailwind. The overflow scroll is just for it to actually be scrollable. And it's very similar with the next one. This is the horizontal one. Instead, it is snap X, and in here, snap center and snap proximity. So that's how snapping would work. I believe someone else is next. It is Andrew.
So just before you move on, you showed us images, and I think that's pretty intuitive. Text would work the same. It would work from word to word or from line to line, kind of the same sort of thing.
Yes, as long as you can add like some margin and a height and a width to the text, and then it will snap right into the middle or the top or the end.
Great, thank you.
So yeah, so basically whatever the containing element is, so you could have a bunch of H1 tags and you could snap to those. You could have paragraph tags mixed with H1 tags, mixed with divs and images and things like that. Let's say they're all in a column like a newspaper, and you could snap to any one of those as well.
So you could snap
Here's
to H tags. That's cool. I like that.
Yeah, it's any element, right? So any HTML element. Where we use it ourselves is, Christina, do you have the dev editor there? Yeah. So here, if you look across the top here on this quick access, these are a bunch of apps, and the snapping, if you just scroll a little bit to the left there, you'll notice when she lets go, it always aligns the app to the to this first app sits right in here, and that always lines up. But on a mobile screen, could you make that smaller? Does this one have, I don't know if we've added it in here, but let's just see, we'll find out. Yeah, so here's kind of a good example. Now on mobile, it always lines up to the center, which is a much better experience. Not that you should be building web apps on your phone, but we have a few people who have done that, and just, they should stop, but yeah.
Yeah, this is going to be a div, and there's some text here, and that's an image, so it works with images and text.
So that's kind of a neat example. So if you're building an app that has a big list, especially mobile devices, it has a big list of delivery items or destinations, clients or something like that, and the user's scrolling through, and there's a fair chunk of text on that, if it can snap all the way to the top, then that's a really nice experience. So I don't think this is in our app staging, that was in our development, but that's going to be probably pushed out in the next deployment. All right, next we have Andrew talking about some print layouts, because some people were asking about printing and ways of tackling that.
Yeah, so here I have an invoice here, and it has address, has some notes, the description, and the total. But when I go to press print, it doesn't look very nice. I can count 5 things here that I want to change. First of all, there shouldn't be a scroll bar in the print. The print button is still here. I don't want that to be there. I think this text is too big. We should make that smaller. This description is way too big. And if we could clamp that down, that'd be great. The fifth thing here,
when you said clamp it down, what do you mean by that? Sorry to interrupt you.
When we clamp it down, Tailwind has a plugin that we're going to address a bit later. But we can cut this string of text here down to maybe just 2 lines of text and then some dots saying it's still continuing, but we clamped it down. The 5th thing we can't really address right now is this report a bug button. This is unique to our sites. It won't be in your sites, so you shouldn't have to worry about that too much. So I'm going to go through and fix those one by one. Starting with the scroll bar. The scroll bar is usually tied to this overflow auto. And all you have to do to change it for just print layouts is to put print colon. And what that does is any class applied here will only apply to prints. So I'm going to put overflow visible instead of overflow auto. And we can test that there. Click on print, and it's gone.
Nice.
Which is great. The next thing we're going to fix is this text here. I think it's too big. Let's make it smaller. We're going to go to the page builder, find out where the text is. It is right here. And we'll just add a print colon, and let's put text small. And repeat that for the other one. Hit save. Give it a refresh and click on print. And now this text is smaller, only in print. And it's the same size here, so don't have to worry about that. Let's say this text is a little too big. I'm going to clamp this down. I'm going to be using a special class that's only available if you have the plugin, but we're going to address that in a bit. So in the description, we're going to add print line clamp 2. And what that'll do is when you click on print,
Andrew, if you can go just a wee bit slower, just my screen is kind of lagging behind.
Oh, sorry about that.
I don't know if anybody else is.
So I'll repeat what I just did so everyone can see it. It says print line clamp 2. This is a special class available if you have the plugin. So if we go to the next page here and we click on print, it clamps the text down to only 2 lines. And the last thing to do is to hide this print button up here. So we're gonna go cancel. We're gonna go back, close this page, find where our print button is. I believe it's up here. Yeah, there's our print button over there. And we're gonna add one more class to it. So print colon hidden. And this is super useful just to hide any element that you don't want on your print. We'll save that. And I believe it is now gone. And that didn't take too long. There's only a few things to fix there. And we have a nice printed layout here.
So that's pretty powerful, because now you can actually have pretty much almost 2 designs on one page. Like you could even include text that you don't have. Let's say you have a footer disclaimer text that says, you know, by signing here, I agree to blah, blah, blah. You could have that appear on the printed version, but not the desktop version, the editable one, and so on.
And so is this page designed for an exact width, or is it fitting the page? And the reason I'm asking is just because in Canada and the US, we have 8.5 by 11, but everywhere else, I think it's slightly narrower. I'm just wondering if that would shrink it.
I think it's because the page is responsive, the browser is effectively as wide as the page on the page, if that makes sense. So the actual page, the actual web page behind this preview has a max width of whatever. So it's not going to span like a crazy wide window. But on a printed layout, it's pushing in. So if you had your printer set to a smaller paper, if you can imagine, this is really your monitor here, right? Like this. So you've effectively moved the border in on your monitor. So if you had smaller paper set up in your printer, this would move in, and because your layout is responsive, it would work fine.
Amazing.
Does that make sense?
Yep, thanks.
And likewise, when it rolls over onto a second page, because you've added or subtracted things, does this do anything to affect that, or we have to do that programmatically?
I think that will end up being the default browser behavior, like whatever. So in this case, it'd be more lines that get added, right? So there's going to be, I don't know offhand, I don't know, Andrew, maybe you know if you can set, I don't think you can explicitly set the breakpoints as such to say, no, don't break in this section. But there might be a class for that.
Looks like we've got a couple questions in the chat as well, Andrew, from Kapil and Edgar.
Okay, I'll address each of them now. Kapil, does this work with Apex charts? Yeah, all this printing stuff should work with anything you use. You just gotta specify what you want to hide, what you want to make smaller. If it's just a chart, I'm sure you can hide the elements around it and make sure the chart is visible. The report, yeah, this report a bug button won't be on your sites. It's only on our sites for people to report bugs and submit their issues. But on your sites, this won't be here, so that won't be an issue. Fonts, Tailwind doesn't use pixels. They use something called REM, which is maybe someone else more knowledgeable can touch on that.
Yeah, there's another printing unit. You can use pixels if you want, though. You can specify things in points, pixels, rems, and something else.
I think Beverly's asking more about the font styles rather than font sizes, though. Using fonts that are not on the user's computer.
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah. So earlier on, and when actually, Andrew, can you jump over to your CSS page section? I'll just address that quick. Of that site, like go back and go to theme styling. There we go, right there. On line, if you look here on line 22, there's an overwrite, and your browser will try to pick fonts, but you can explicitly say what fonts you want if the user doesn't have anything installed. if you haven't specifically added a link to that. So Google has a whole repository of fonts, for example, some of our templates that use Interfont, which is a public domain font. And then in which case you'll see something like right in here, you'll see Inter, and then it'll try to use the Interfont first, and then it'll try to use the Open Sans, and then it'll try to go to Helvetica, and then to Arial, which are all sans serif fonts, and then the default sans serif font of the system. So you can dial that in as to how it looks. I think for the majority of our clients, we're not hyper particular if that's not exact. I've seen maybe one client that was extremely fussy with the font, with the exact precise typeface on every browser. But for the most part, things should look pretty consistent, and you can certainly have full 100% control over that.
Yeah, that's a biggie, and why I asked, because I had clients that wanted a particular font, and to make it always appear that way, I had to do some PHP tricks where they had menus in a particular font, and I created, JPEGs or PNGs out of them so that they were exactly that font, for buttons and menu things. And it really wasn't a font of text anymore. It was a graphic. And so it's just, and I know I see the question even on the FileMaker doc, where people want particular font styles, families, within FileMaker, and you run into that huge problem if, even if you have this whole list of, well, I'll substitute this out, you've got clients that will say, no, I've got to have this. This is what I want. My designer did this. And so I don't know how we address that other than my old way of making it a graphic.
Well, yeah, there's a problem with that though now. That won't cut it, unfortunately, with a lot of organizations because it's not accessible, right?
Yeah.
And accessible trumps everything now.
Yeah, but if it's a graphic, you can put that alt tag in there.
You can, and you'd have to just define it so that they really realize it's a navigation and things like that.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
But it would still probably be not considered ideal. But I think from the people in the apps that I've seen, and we should just touch base really, really quick about accessibility here. And maybe we can have a meetup on that at some point in time.
That'd
but
be great.
We don't think about, in FileMaker world, we never generally think about building accessible apps. FileMaker inherently isn't truly accessible, but it doesn't need to be because the operating system more or less is. So you can still use the app because it sits within, OS X or whatever. But when you're building a public web app, it's a whole different story. We're now, imagine your app is on a kiosk in a mall. It doesn't matter what your app does. Can everybody who walks by, can they all use it? And I didn't appreciate accessibility until I started going to a couple meetups, and I was at this one in Amsterdam where they had two presenters, and they showed a person who was blind using a site. And it's like, after that, it's like, yeah, we got to make things more accessible, right? You start to really, really appreciate that. So if you're public facing something and it's an application, a public application, you pretty much have to, and there are some, I think, government mandates for certain organizations where it pretty much has to be accessible. We do have an example page. We can get pretty decent on the accessibility with BetterForms because you can add, as Beverly mentioned, things like alt tags for images. And we could add various bits of metadata and things like that in as we need them too. So, all right. I think next is Pearson. You were gonna. I think
we had a few questions in the chat.
Oh, sorry.
I want to address those.
Could this be used to create a PDF that could be uploaded? That's a really good question there. Neil asked if you can make a PDF to upload it to S3. So there's a couple caveats there, right? You can't render anything on server. So if you're thinking about generating it from FileMaker on server, no, you can't, because FileMaker can't do that. But you can, if you have a static page, there are a number of sites that will do the rendering for you. And all you have to do is basically hit that URL with a query parameter of your URL of the site that you want to render, and it'll return you back an image. We use that for our thumbnails. Andrew, can you go to the Or is that my screen or yours? Yeah. Oh, that was
Sorry, you cut out for a second.
just you go to pages there.
Oh, yep.
Yeah, just anywhere, anything that has thumbnails. So these thumbnails here are generated like that. So in fact, we don't even generate them. They're generated by you visiting that link, and that link hits that third-party site, which in turn opens up that BetterForms page, and then it renders it and caches it in their CDN. So you sort of can do that kind of stuff. You can't generate it natively as such or using FileMaker proper, but certainly can generate those kinds of reports. Mac and Windows. So Neil, Mac and Windows both have options to print PDFs into printer. Yeah, and I think that's kind of sort of along the same lines. I was thinking more using BetterForms layout to create a PDF that can automatically send to a client as part of a named action. So let's see. Okay, so if it's part of a named action, that means the client's using the browser. So that means the browser is active. So screen layout for now, and they click a button that can go to a print layout or invoke the print modifier or the alternate layout or a totally separate layout. You could from there, let's see, you wanted to export that to a, yeah, you know what? I wouldn't rely on the browser. I would think I'd use a third-party service for that, actually. And some of them can return PDFs. The one we use is called Thumb.io. I think it's Thumb without a B, Thumb.io. And it's like a whole $2 a month. It's crazy cheap. So you may want to check that out.
All right, Pearson.
Thank you. Yeah, so now I'm going to cover a couple of new topics, one being dark mode and the other being design systems. So dark mode, Tailwind has this new ability to use dark mode quickly and easily. So I'll first go over the benefits of dark mode. It's not something super essential. It really depends on the product you're putting out. It's really helpful if you have something that users will be using late at night, or just kind of using for long periods of time in the evening. And that's just because what dark mode does is it reduces your phone battery, or it reduces the energy needed to power your phone, so it makes your phone battery last longer. It reduces the stress on your eyes because maybe you guys have heard of those glasses that have come into popularity in the last couple of years. Those glasses reduce the blue light that come into your retinas, and that causes less strain. And so that's the same effect as what dark mode does. It allows you to use your phone without hurting your eyes, or late at night, it doesn't keep you up. So it's this very small thing, but it's an interesting element that's been added to Tailwind with just a simple dark class. And I think, and I could be wrong, but I believe this will follow your system preferences or system time. Yeah, so it can be enabled automatically, or it can be enabled manually with a button or something. Pretty simple, but it does go a long way if that if this does apply to an app that you're creating or putting out, because it shows the user that you are conscious of, what's going on in their lives. It makes it look like you care. It shows them that you care about their well-being. But it's a very small thing. I just thought it was cool, and it's a very kind of new, hip thing to add to your apps.
I have a question on that.
Sure.
And I'm gonna start with a qualifier. I hate dark mode. I cannot use dark mode. And if I go to a site that does not give me an option to turn that off, I don't go to that site ever again.
Mm-hmm.
It should be based on the system. The site should.
It should give the user an option. If you're forcing it on somebody, it's not a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that does tie into why having a way to enable it or disable it manually is so important, because I know that it is a semi-controversial element. A lot of people like it. A lot of people don't like it. A lot of people probably don't really care either way. It's this new concept that's been coming out. And I guess you know, in a few years, I'm sure we'll figure out if it sticks around or if it leaves. But can I actually ask why you're not a fan of dark mode, just out of curiosity?
It actually hurts my eyes, regardless of the light. My preference is to have a lighter, or I mean, a less light background contrast to. So if you have dark text and you have, you know, just an off tint white, almost slightly gray, then it's less battery. It's less, you know, it's the contrast that's the problem. And when you have white on dark, it's the contrast that bothers me. And again, if the contrast was not such a huge contrast, you know, it could be darker, and you know, the text itself, the white, instead of being white, be it less white, then you have a different contrast that doesn't hurt me. I just bothers me.
You know, it's interesting. We have one product that we developed for a client, and he makes a couple good points. He says the typical user of this particular software is 40 plus, and that's approximately the age that if your eyes are going to kind of start flaking out a little bit, that's around then. So the default point size in the apps is just slightly bigger. You know, and that was done intentionally. And there's a few things. I mean, it's almost an accessibility issue in many ways, and how to handle that. And that's stuff we don't always think about. But if we're building software as a service, which about 20% of you guys have, or something where the user can elect to not use your application, let's just say that, then you really need to consider that stuff, right? We really got to work on the fit and finish, and continue to dial in the software, not just kind of make it so it like it was a FileMaker app that's inside, and you know, the accounting department uses it and they don't complain, kind of thing. So interesting.
Yeah, no, I like what you said there, Charles, about keeping it accessible. And this isn't even accessibility towards people with obvious signs of handicap or anything like that. It's accessibility to everyone universally, based on age or capabilities or disabilities. It's just everybody. So with dark mode, I can totally understand people who find that maybe if their eyes are just too sensitive based on whatever reason, dark mode could and does turn a lot of people away from that service. And so I think that's just because, you know, the dark background is the contrast with the white text, like you said, really is jarring. Whereas if you have a lighter background, even if it's not pure white, it's just a lighter background with darker text, your eyes have already adjusted to that bright background or lighter background. So it's less jarring to see darker text. So like I said, you know, it's not essential for everybody. It really depends on what you're creating and who you're creating it for. But it is an option now with Tailwind. So now I'm going to move on to design systems. Now, design systems are a way for designers to create something that is to create a system universal to the app, so they don't have to keep going back and forth deciding should this text be this big or this text be this big, should this box or these inputs look like this on this page or this on the other page. It should all look universally coherent as a single product. So with design systems, you create this map of elements. And so I'm using Tailwind's design system as an example. So they put this out for free. I think they might have retracted it because it was giving away too much information about their own branding. But they created this Figma file. Figma is an application I use for designing software or designing interfaces. And so they showed me, or they gave out all of their elements, so I could see this is how they do passwords with an error in it. This is how they write inputs with a label, or if there's an icon trailing, or if there's an input separated from that input, or if there's an element separated from the input box. All of these elements, very specific use cases, but now they don't have to think about it anymore with any applications that they're building. So that's one of the important aspects of initial design, is to create this system so that everything is coherent, everything makes sense, and you're not, from one page doesn't look like another app from one page to the other. You want to keep it all in the family. And so you could relate this to dark mode as well. If you want to make sure that certain elements in dark mode look a certain way and certain elements in light mode look a certain way, but just keeping it all the same. But there's so many different elements, like the radio groups, there's toggles, there's action panels. All these very specific things have been pre-designed, and so now when I'm creating stuff, I can use a lot of these for myself and just kind of pop them in here and there. But Tailwind isn't the only one who does this. Any large company will have their own design system, where you can even sometimes look it up online. I've found other companies like Apple or Spotify. I've seen their design systems documented on their own websites, and so you can look at theirs and get information or gain some inspiration just to see what those guys are doing. Maybe implement some of those design practices into your own work, and a lot of small things like this can elevate your product to make it look modern and cool, and just make it look overall professional and nice.
Consistency is really key there too. I think that's something that Pearson's really brought to our new UI, and I think we're only probably halfway about overhauling things, but the consistency and how it is.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I see a few chat.
There's one actually in there from Dean. It says, "Is Tailwind responsive to age?" Which is kind of a funny question, because here's what you can do, right? At first, it's like, it's kind of cute, right? It should know, but your software knows, your database probably knows the age of the user, right? Either with a birth date or with a category of people or something like that. And by knowing that, you could easily pass that data to the front end and change the whole point size for the entire app if you wanted to do that. And I think some of you guys are already doing stuff like that, where they have a user preference and they can change, point size, and that saves somewhere within the app. So you could it's not really a Tailwind thing, it's a BetterForms thing, but you could sort of technically do that.
Mm-hmm. And Neil, I see you're asking, are you asking about this Figma file? Because I can try to either find the original. I've modified this one a little bit, so I can try to find the original. Maybe I can share that to Slack. Otherwise, I can share this one and give you guys some inspiration.
Pearson, when you're using design systems, do you find, excuse me, does it, from a user experience, not a user interface aspect, does it limit you, or does it allow you to more kind of explore what the user actually needs to, like the interactions rather than the beauty of something? I don't know if that makes sense.
I think I know what you're asking.
Does it limit you in any way?
Sometimes when I first started, if I'm creating a design system, then maybe I'll create something, and then as I'm working on building, like if I create the design system and I'm working on a product, and then I'll notice, I do kind of wish this input box was a little different or something like that. Then I could get into some trouble there. But the point is to make it easier for you to start or to create these things. And if you have to make some small adjustments here and there just to fit the current project you're working on, and that's no problem. But I think it does help me focus more on I can focus more on the usability rather than the styling of something. So that's why Tailwind really helps, because I can really figure out, you know, I can construct the experience without having to really spend a lot of time on like the colors and the font size and the layout. It saves me a lot of time there. And it looks like, yeah, I think some people have already found the file. So
Yeah, I can see the
yeah.
collaboration.
Yeah. I know, that's great. I will say that this is an older version of Tailwind. They haven't done Tailwind 3.0. They haven't released that in a Figma file or anything, but I mean, you know, there is so much content in this file that you know, who needs 3.0? At least for a design system, you know.
Yeah, I think Chris had a question.
I do. I guess this is one of my main questions with Tailwind is just the universal, non-universal nature of it. With CSS, you had something you call a save button, and you knew that all your save buttons were consistent. How do you manage that? Are you going back and looking at a previous page? How are you doing that just from an execution standpoint of keeping things looking?
Great question.
That's a good
Actually,
segue into
yeah, and segue, yeah, exactly. So actually, Christina's can answer that with her next.
Okay, perfect.
All right, moving on to Christina then.
So I'll be, Charles and Andrew both mentioned the invisible buttons. If you haven't come across it already, I'm going to finally be showing you what that actually is. So on here, a page schema, I have just the button snippet. And this is the default button classes, is BTN, BTN info. All I did was add a margin 4 in the style class, so it's not just pushing against this sidebar. And if I start hovering, you see it pops up. And it turns out Tailwind does that on purpose. They added in a transparent class so you can completely style your buttons. And that's where I'm going to bring up the @apply. @apply is used for abstracting and styling. So if you have a lot of reuse of certain styles, like buttons for sure, like a button primary, a button secondary, button danger, it prevents you from having to track down where you added all those buttons or all that text, and you'll have it in one place, and it will just be much more convenient because you'll be able to change it in one place. And to do that, inside of site settings, the DOM header insertions, I have a style tag with the type Tailwind type text / Tailwind CSS, and I defined a BTN-pry. Here's the @apply, and here's all Tailwind classes. And some immediate problems I'm going to point out is naming. If you name a class like BTN-pry, if you name something that overlaps with a Tailwind class or a Bootstrap class because it's in our framework, it will clash, and it doesn't just break the one element where you have that one button, it'll break the whole page and you won't have any styling. So you need to come up with like unique names. And a second problem is this BTN-pry has higher specificity. So if I were to, first I will put this BTN-pry in, so this is no longer invisible. I'm going to add that in here in the button classes. Just save.
You put a .pry, I think. It's hyphen.
All right, so there we go. It's finally visible. And the specific.
Sorry, Christina, you can. I don't know if there's a. You don't need those other classes in there then, right? The original Bootstrap classes.
Oh, that's right. That's completely unnecessary. So I'll remove all of that. And to go back to the specificity, to go back to that, let's say I did not want the button to be blue. I wanted it to be red. If I go in here and do background red 500 and save it. Over here, let me just refresh to make sure. It is clearly not red at all. So to do that, Tailwind added an exclamation mark that you can put right at the front, and that will give it higher importance. Now, the background red shows up.
So you'll often see, if you do some research or reading or about using CSS and things, you'll see don't use important, because what happens is you put important at some class that's way over in your style sheet, like when I started speaking today, and then you can never go anywhere with that. You can't, if I say, the button is important blue, I can never anywhere down the line, I can never overwrite that. But where Christina added this important is at the actual button. So there's nothing underneath it. So this is like a perfect use case. And it's actually what important was designed for. So I guess, Christina, you can overwrite anything then. So now you can take your default button, but if you had a really small one that you wanted to have in a modal or something like that, you could just overwrite like the padding or the text size and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Or make it full width.
Is ring, everything can be overwritten. So that means
focus
you
right.
don't come back to like change your styles in here. You go into the specific one you want to change. So this should be your master style. And then if you have a tiny adjustment, you edit in your page schema. I see a question in the chat. Comparing Tailwind to Bootstrap, what would be the advantages of Tailwind?
I can take that one if you want. So Bootstrap is very opinionated. It's flexible-ish, but it's very opinionated. If you go to Bootstrap and you look at 3, 4, and what is it, 5 beta or whatever, and if you were to look at those stuff, all of this stuff looks specifically like a Bootstrap app, right? And then when you want to overwrite those things, you have to use some CSS in a CSS sheet and overwrite the specific one. So let's say we have a button, right? Button class for Bootstrap is BTN. That gives it the hover and the shape of the rounded corners and stuff. And then buttons hyphen, say primary, which is like a bluish kind of color. That was the color that I think you started off with. So that button primary, so you have this button and it has a certain size, and Bootstrap has predefined sizes, button large, button small, button extra large. And I think there's an extra small there as well. So now I want to create a button, but I want to change one aspect of it because it's going to go on a modal, and the modal happens to be in a dark modal, dark background, and I want to change the way this one button works. So now I have to override the stuff in this button. I can't override it right at the exact component. I have to create some CSS, and then that overrides a component. That overrides, and I add a tag in my button classes, and then that works for that button. But then I create another one, and now I got more CSS there. And they're disconnected because I have an opinionated style, whereas Tailwind is pure utilities. It has no opinion. I'm not sure. Am I up next?
Yes.
And okay, so yeah, let me. Am I? Yeah. Okay. So let me give you some examples of that. Let me share my desktop here. All right. So one of the things, here's something you cannot do with Bootstrap. You can't do with any other CSS architecture that is not utility based, right? Utility means just small tokens to represent single things. So I have this hello world page. This is my hello world thing. Actually, I'm going to keep that, and I'm going to go into my next block here. And we're focusing on this kind of stuff because this is, all of these things apply to our BetterForms elements out of the box as well, for the most part. But for really we're kind of getting into a little bit more fancier stuff, which I see a lot of people building. So I got, here's my stuff here, and I want to find something. I'm not very good at design, so I like to just kind of copy. I can change a few things and keep it reasonably good looking. So Tailwind actually has a paid library called Tailwind UI, and you can visit that tailwindui.com. But I'm going to go to a free one, or I'm just actually going to put Tailwind components, and I'm just going to search for Tailwind components. Here's a site called Tailwind Components, but there's a whole bunch of them, right? Because it's pretty popular framework, right? And this is a nice thing about being able to tap into outside of the FileMaker ecosystem, because it's massive out there, right? So here's one that's called Tailwind Components, a free component repository. And I like cards, so I'm going to go find some cards. And well, here's kind of a cool card here. It's got some greeny stuff and some text on it and things like that. And I think I can use that for my app. Actually, let me find a better one. This one here. And I want to use that for my application. So this is the cool thing about it. I literally click on this. I have a quick look. I usually quick look under here because these are public domains, so that people just submit them. So sometimes they don't really understand the concepts of Tailwind, and they'll put extra stuff in there. They'll put CSS in there. There's absolutely no reason to. So, all right. So there's my card. I literally copy this. I go over to BetterForms and I paste it in here, and boom, there's my card. Now we want to connect that data up, right? That's another issue. Most of you guys already know how to do this, but I can easily say something like model.name first. I don't think I have a model.name first. So let's create a key called model.name for, oh, actually I got one that's called people. That's kind of interesting. So it was okay though. Name first. And we'll go Charles. And kaboom, now I've taken the data from FileMaker. This is just dummy data, but just with data, it's actually just JSON that would come from FileMaker. And I popped it into this card almost like in seconds, right? That's what you can't do with Bootstrap at all, right? You can't take an exact style. Look at all the variety of styles, right? If you look at all various Bootstrap templates, and there's a Wrap Bootstrap, I think it's called, WRAP. Wrap Bootstrap is a Bootstrap theme site that sells themes, and they almost all look very similar. Little shapes and sizes change, but here you can do virtually anything like this, right? All of these kinds of things. I mean, you can get close with Bootstrap, but we're not limited at all here. Totally doing stuff like that, which is really, really cool. So that's one of the main differences. Hopefully that answers your question. So what happens when there's not a class? I'm doing some these class things. Let me save this and let me go back to the simple one here. And I want to use some kind of, I don't know, I've Googled, and there's a certain thing that on a certain browser, I need a special CSS class, right? A special style class. And it's like, I can't, Tailwind doesn't have one. Or Tailwind has 3x and then they have 4XL. But Pearson went and gave me a design, and it's got 17.32 pixels high for the font. He doesn't do that, but let's say hypothetically he did. So I need to get this exact. So what I can do is Tailwind has this thing called arbitrary values now. This is all part of this, this new library. And the old library was a big collection of CSS. It was just a giant file you imported in, and you were done. The new one is JavaScript based. And what it's doing under the hood is it's watching in the browser for, there's this thing called the mutation observer. And basically in the browser, when the browser requests a style, it says, oh, you don't have that style. Let me whip it up on the fly. This is what it should look like based on what you've named it. And then it adds it in. So it only has to do it once. So it's pretty performant. So I want to change this, and I want to put exactly 27 pixels. So there's no 27 pixel one in there. There's various sizes, and you can look them up on the Tailwind site. You go to font size, maybe font size here, and I can see all the different small, medium, large, and I can see what they equate to. And I can try them out, but I need something in between there, right? So here's how we do it. We actually just put square braces in wherever we need to put the value, the arbitrary value. And then we put 27, 27.5. And we have to specify a unit, so pixels, and boom, there's my 27.5 pixels. So it's super powerful. You want to increase the space above this thing, this entire thing. I want to put margin on the top, and I want to put exactly 62 pixels. And now I've just done that, right? So that's really, really powerful. You can also, let me see if I can do this right here. I'm going to back this out a little bit. And let's go to where I put the color. And I'm just going to erase this. I'm just going to put this on a fresh line here. This is a nice thing. Stuff doesn't always have to be in a line. If you can't read it, put it on separate lines so you can work with it. You can see what you're doing. All right. So if I want to, let me see if I do this right. It does not have to be a bootstrap thing. Any CSS can go in here. So, or any styling. So if I put color, red, let me just see. Actually, it looks like it's already red still. Where's the red coming from? Right, background red, text center. Let me just see this for a second here. I just want to see. Oh no, it's not red. Okay, sorry, I thought it was. All right, so I put color red, and you can see what it's done is it's made this text red. All right, so that's just a normal style that you would have. Remember when I created that Friday red, right, with the 2Ds. This is the same thing, but I'm doing it here now. Now, why would you want to do this? Well, this is the cool thing, is because I can do something like I can say medium. On a medium-sized screen, it's red, but on a small screen, on a mobile device, maybe red's too. So we're going to go mobile first. So that means the red will take priority first, and we'll put it as blue. All right. So now let's see if I've done this right. Now there it is there. So the medium, that's actually at the breakpoint, 768 or whatever. So you can see the color changes now. On my small screen, it's this color. On the medium screen, it's that color. Now I'm just using a color one, but it can be any kind of craziness that you found on Stack Overflow. You can stick it in here and it just works. So I think that's really, really cool. Like we could do something like, and you can do these modifiers here. You can do those on all of the tags now. Before with Tailwind 1 and 2, there was only a certain ones that you could do. Things like group hover. I'm not sure if we have an example of group hover. Group hover is when I hover over here, and then something way over on the line, the edit box, the little edit icon appears over here, right? But I hover over on this end of the line, and that thing shows up on that side, even though it's in a totally different element. Those can all be done now as well. So these are the CSS arbitrary values or Tailwind arbitrary values. So if there's ever a size or something specific that you need, excuse me, you can just put it in square braces. So it's really, really easy to use. Once you've used it a couple of times, you'll get the hang of it. I don't think there's a technical advantage to using their color versus if it turns out to be exact same one. Oh, by the way, if you wanted to create a custom color, you have a special brand. We have a lot of clients that have special brands, and they got like a, I don't know, CE44 FF as a color. Is that one? I guess it is. You can easily do that just the same. Oops, sorry, a medium. Here, let me just see if I can't see the difference here, but actually, sorry, I did not specifying a color. I should say here, text hyphen, there we go. So there it is there. So you can easily specify those kinds of things now, but there's a better way of doing this, because if this is a brand color, instead, as Christina showed with that at apply, you can specify all of those designs using Tailwind's design system. You could do this in CSS before, but using Tailwind's classes, which are way easier to use, you can specify that now in one area, and then just use whatever it is, a logo or a primary or a brand, something like that. You can say text brand if you've already got that defined somewhere else. So that is Tailwind arbitrary values. And let me see, I don't know what else we got here. Plugins. Oh, this is another really interesting thing too. Andrew mentioned this, and I think he's got some examples of that as well. Tailwind has, they call them plugins, and they're not really, they're kind of an extension more than a plugin. And there's 4 official ones. And there they are here. And here they are here. There's a typography one, a forms one, aspect ratio, and a line clamp. And I'll, Andrew, I think, or I'll show you, I think Andrew's got some examples of these, but basically they're just extensions to that main library. And the reason they're not included is because they're extra code that not everybody uses. So you want to keep your CDNs as small as possible. The new Tailwind CDN is about 200-ish K. The old one was about about 25% bigger, 250 roughly. And hopefully they do some more minimizing, but it's not too bad now. It's not nearly as bad as big, and it's way more flexible. So to add these plugins is pretty simple. You basically pick the name of your plugin. So I want to use the typography plugin, say, and it's called typography. And what this particular plugin, I'll just mention quickly what they do is they take your standard spacings for H1 tags, paragraphs, and that kind of stuff, and it gives it a little bit more airy room. I think I have an example. I'm not sure if there's an example here. This is just a new page that we're working on. And this here is using a typography plugin right here. You can see that the interline spacing is bigger. This spacing is bigger. And that is actually, there's not an extra a line break in between. There's actual margin bottom kind of thing going on there. So that's one of the big differences there, or sorry, one of the use cases there. And the way we install these, we grab the name and we go over to our tags where we installed Tailwind, and we just add it as a query parameter. It's question mark plugin, plugins, plural, equals, and then the name of the plugin, typography. Oops. Okay. Typography. There we go. And if you want to add the extra ones like line clamp, I think it's line hyphen clamp, and so on, you can add those. You can add those in there just the same. And that all is in the documentation of the Tailwind here as well, on how to add those in under the CDN. All right, I'm going to pass it over to Andrew, who has, I think, did you still have a demo for those at all, Andrew?
Yep.
Okay, so I'll drop off here.
We got a question earlier about line breaks for the printing layout, and I wanted to showcase that. So you see how this description is very big. I didn't line clamp it for the example, and our total down here is totally cut off, and we can't scroll down. That's something that I forgot to mention earlier. We just have to add an H full on the print. So print H full, and then we can click on print now. We can now scroll down. You can see the two different pages. Since Charles mentioned that we have the line clamp, we installed it there. We can just put line clamp 2 there. Save that. I think I saved it. Yeah. Line clamp.
Yeah.
And yep, line clamp. But the other plugin that we wanted to showcase was the typography one. And let's say you're given a big block of HTML like this. It doesn't look too pretty. But with the new typography plugin, all we have to do is apply the class here, call it P rows, and automatically it styles the whole page for you, or whatever you targeted the div. And you can see the spacing is nice. Lists look nice. Even I believe I have a table example on here, and this is without any of our own classes. This is all from the P rows. And let's say you think this is too small for a big screen, you can even set breakpoints. So let's say on large screens you want to do P rows large, and you can see it gets bigger. So you can also have different breakpoints for how big you want the text to be on certain screens.
So a real world example of this is you want to pull some kind of copy from FileMaker and render it here. And the copy could be entered in FileMaker as Markdown, which is typically what a lot of blog systems use. When you have like a hashtag, 4 hashtags for an H1 and things like that. Or it could just be just raw HTML as Andrew has here. And now you just overwritten this HTML and you made it actually look really, really good.
That's pretty much it for that. You have another plugin that you wanted to showcase?
I think just there's, oh yeah, I have one actually. Here, I'll jump to mine. So there's another one called aspect ratio. And I'll show you where it gets used. We have an app. Let me see if I can find it here. I need a link. Portal. Yeah, it's not really in the portal, I don't think so. Let me just pull that up here. And I just gotta jump through a couple hoops just to get to the app, because the app is in a survey here. Yeah, I can do this. All right, so got this app, and this is a problem I ran into a couple years ago when I made this. You click get started and it shows video. And that's fine on a bigger screen. And then I had a problem. It's like I go on a smaller screen. Now this doesn't do it because I fixed it. Actually, it does do it. You can see what the problem is, kind of some funkiness is going down there. Mine, it changes a little bit in height, but yeah, let me just close that. There we go. But you can see that it's kind of like less than ideal. So we want to really ideally, as the page gets smaller on a mobile device, keep the proper aspect ratio. Here's another example of that. This is our team here. And so we have this team page that we're working on. And it's got all these people, these pictures, and ignore this. We were just playing with this last night, this header, trying to have a sticky header and see what that would look like. So here's this team page, and this is data driven, but we didn't bother pulling this from FileMaker. It's just data that's in the data model, static data, because there's no reason to have a database of this stuff. So, but it's the same kind of an idea there. Oops, I went and reported a bug. That's why we have that, but that's not what I want to do. There we go. But when I shrink this up, what I don't want to happen is I don't want these things to remain the same height on a smaller screen. So you can see as I shrink this up, the aspect ratio changes. Now, if I didn't have that, let's go into that particular page and you can get an idea of what's happening there. And this is, oops, sorry, good old mouse. Yeah, marketing site. And let me see what page is it. It is the team page. Here we go. Okay. So I'm just gonna make this a bit bigger so you can see, and let's just find it. Find is your friend here. Aspect ratio. There we go. All right. So I'm just gonna kind of get rid of these two classes just so they don't work, and save that again. And jump over to here. And you can see this is about like a 3-4 kind of thing. Let me just refresh this page and move some stuff around here. All right. So you can see, first of all, here's the first problem, right? Got all these kind of sizes all over the place. It's a little bit revealing, right? Because it shows a little bit more in the picture than we expected. So that's the first thing. So it automatically, we can apply a height to this. But the real problem is when I go and do this, right? And I go smaller, they get all these different sizes. So it's an inconsistent experience. So if we just flip that back, you can see why hit undo, save, and refresh. And you can see why that's different. So now we got this kind of thing going on. Right, so it's a much better effect, and it was the same thing can happen, and it's really easy. You can arbitrarily set the aspect ratios, which is really cool. So let me just find it here again, and I'll show you. So there we go. Aspect ratio, width 3 and height 2. So that becomes like a ratio. You can also specify it as a ratio as well. So you can say 3/2 and that kind of thing. So that's just another thing if you're building some kind of cards, especially with images, and you want to maintain a certain ratio. That's a great way of doing that. And Pearson, you're gonna did you want to talk about that blur?
Yeah, I've got one more piece I'd like to share, and it's more just it's another design style that I'll go into, and that's using the background backdrop blur. And so this blur can be used in several different ways. Maybe as whether to bring attention towards something by hiding something else, or maybe it's a stylistic choice to what is it called? Glassmorphism. Glassmorphism is a design style that's very modern. Apple, I'm sure you've recognized it in Apple or Windows products. But I'll begin by talking about the practical use of blurring something. So let's say on an app, you want to bring focus onto a certain element, or maybe you want to show something that the user's clicked and make it known, make the user realize that something is different. That's where you can background blur something. So let's say you click on a menu, and the menu pops out. You might want to blur the background a little bit just to reveal the menu first of all, and also to make it known that the background is still active, or that this menu has only popped over it and the background, whatever's going on, is still there, not that you've changed the page or anything. So these are some small affordances that we recognize in UX, just to let the user know like where they are, where they are in the workflow. And so this background blur or backdrop blur can really help with that. So with Tailwind, we have just some easy classes to use, ranging from small amounts of blur to a greater amount of blur. Small meaning that you can still kind of make out what's behind, and then the more blurry it gets, the more abstract or the more unrecognizable something is in the background. So glassmorphism is a design style that was popularized, I think it came out in iOS 7 all the way back then, and I got some screenshots. And it essentially, glassmorphism is just to replicate a foggy glass, or I think there's a proper word for it, but that type of glass that obscures the view. So you can see with Apple, in iOS 7, this is where they introduced it, where they blurred the background when you brought down that notification menu, and they still use it today. They use it a lot, and they even use it in their more modern stylings, in their modern OS. I'm sure you might recognize this screen if you're an Apple user and you have a MacBook or an iMac. It's this style to replicate that frosted glass is what it's called, and that's just a cool stylistic choice. There's also some problems with that that some people have come to conclusions about, whether it's fashion over function is kind of up for debate, but it is a cool little look. You can see it again here, where it's a very subtle thing, but it reveals the background somewhat in their interface, and that's nothing too UX centric. It's more just aesthetic and style, but it is an interesting mechanic to use, and it can make your products give that modern sleek feel in a very easily. And so that's my last tidbit on background blur.
And unfortunately, we don't have an example of that. But we did play around with, and it looked really neat. And I was just trying to make an example up quick here, but I didn't get it done in time.
Yeah.
You need to stall more. I should have messaged you.
Yeah.
But and I don't know. I thought it looked neat, but I'm looking at it from a technical aspect. But it was in the background of a modal, because you could blur the entire mask of the modal, and the main thing was in focus. And I thought that was kind of interesting. But there is one place where you do kind of see this kind of stuff. And maybe I can share my desktop again.
I guess it's like to simulate a depth of field, to bring something forward, making it very prominent. highlighting it as the main focus of the page at the time.
So yeah, and excuse me. So if you had something like, let's say we're going to be introducing some plans here, and we didn't want to make this one. I'm not going to actually do the page. I'm just going to modify it in the browser here, and we didn't want this one to be maybe available. Like it's not an option yet. We can add that blur. And you've seen stuff like that. It says, coming soon. And you can programmatically add that, right? So that can be based on data. Like we're not at this stage of production yet, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and maybe 3 and 4 are blurred. Or this can, simulate it's almost like a skeleton state, but it's obfuscated, but you could still copy and paste it. So if you're putting real data underneath there and you need to hide that for some reason, you can see the button still works. All right. But that's the same kind of that's a kind of idea. That's one of the ways that one time we use that same feature. But anyhow, that's sort of something that another way you could use that. I think, how are we doing for questions? I think that covers most of the stuff, and I think we're not too bad for time. I think it covers most of the stuff. I'm going to mention a couple quick resources that you can start playing with things. Don't even need to use BetterForms. Tailwind has a thing called Tailwind or play.tailwindCSS, and you can basically go in and you can start playing around if you want to experiment and understand things. And you may notice that this editor, aside from the color, looks a heck of a lot like this editor. In fact, we're using even the same libraries underneath the hood, and that's just pure coincidence because we came out with them almost at the same time, which was kind of nifty. Ours can drag in from both sides; theirs can't. But anyhow, so here's how you do it. You basically create a div, and oops. And there we go. I just have a little text expander that does that. And you start with, hello world. And just try to understand what things do. Okay, what is the thing for padding? Go over to the documentation, right? You say, okay, well, I want some spacing. I don't know, maybe what's padding. I think it's called padding, right? So I hit slash in the docs. I hit slash in the docs and go padding, right? And oops, padding, there we go. Scroll padding, not quite the same one. So I can go back and forth, and I stumble along is what I'm getting at. And when I do that, I realize, okay, there's a class, and then I can go back over to here and I say, padding 4, and there it is, right? And then I start to build up my things that I want to build out, background red 100, and so on. This is kind of neat because it gives you some classes, and it tells you what's going on underneath the hood. We're looking at this. This is going to be more of maybe a third quarter project, but we'll probably redo the editor in BetterForms to be able to take advantage of some of this type hinting, which will give you a lot of really cool benefits. Not only because we can control what the hinting is, we can give you things like named actions and all kinds of cool stuff that you're using right in BetterForms as well to interface with FileMaker. But you can see how I'm doing that here, and I'm just put a margin around, margin 3, rounded, full, margin space hyphen, right? And that way it gives you an idea, and then you can start playing around with all of that kind of stuff and really understand. It's beyond the scope of this particular meetup to go over what Flex is, but that's a really, really powerful thing. And I think we covered it once in a prior meetup that should be probably online somewhere. But just by learning those things about margin, padding, bit of flex, and some of these new features that we talked about today will get you pretty far in customizing and theming up your apps. Does anybody have any questions on anything so far? And guys, thanks a lot. You guys did a great job today, I think, presenting stuff. Right. If you like some of the designs and things like that, feel free to contact us. We can help you with your designs. We do have a whole consulting side as well now. So, and we got direct access to the people who wrote the code. So that's always a good thing too. All right. I guess if we don't have any questions, I'm going to stop our recording here. And we'll just continue.